Hey
What's
everyone.
going on? Hey, what's going on, fam?
Good. Good to see you. Hey everyone. So I'm going to do a quick little intro for everyone here before we kick it off proper. Again, we're in for another real treat. This is so much fun, and I just can't say enough about my colleagues and the whole hip hop team at Hart House for bringing these incredible people together. These talks are just incredible. So I hope everyone out there is enjoying it. Really quickly, I'll throw it to our two wonderful guests, DJ Lynnée, a Black music scholar, and obviously, of course, a DJ, as the name says. So we're really excited to have you. We'll allow you and Craig to do a much more in-depth biography and chat. And then also DJ Craig Brooklyn, someone I'm very fond of. Something that doesn't say on his bio, a DJ artist, but also an educator. DJ Craig Brooklyn last year was our teacher, our educator as part of the Hart House Hip Hop Education School of Beats program. So we had a program where students got to learn how to DJ. There's a gold record behind me right there. That was part of that program. And he's an incredible instructor, personality, and a lovely man. I'll pass it on to you to start the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the pleasant intro. I appreciate it. So salute to everyone inside the room, inside the Zoom right now, and participating in this great platform that we're having here. I'm DJ Craig Brooklyn from Toronto. Spent many years of my life in this culture, in this game, as a professional DJ, recording artist, dancer, everything that revolves around hip hop. That's pretty much been my whole life. And joining us this afternoon is DJ Lynnée, who I just recently met and already grew fond of her just based off of her energy alone. So we're just going to sit there and just have, sit here, just have like a nice little talk with her, a few questions from my end, just some stuff. So, give you guys a deeper insight. And, as we talk, if you guys have any questions that you guys want to ask us or just want to shoot out there, just go ahead and shoot that in the chat. But DJ Lynnée, how about you just go start off by introducing yourself and then we'll just move on forward from there.
Okay, cool. My name is DJ Lynnée Denise, and I am from Los Angeles, California. I am currently a lecturer at UCLA for the African American Studies Department, where I teach a class actually called Black DJ Culture and Music Migration. And so part of my work is in thinking about electronic music of the African diaspora and the ways in which sound system culture shaped multiple subgenres of music, hip hop being one of the sort of, I guess, more explored ones.
Okay, work. I want to also touch on the migration of music as we get deeper into the conversation. But let's get a little personal so they get so the people could know us a little bit better. So you grew up out in LA, where which is plays a big role in the hip hop culture. And growing up, I know like from me being from Toronto and have like a strong New York background, there's always been that East Coast, West Coast, side of music. It was very distinct back then than how it is now. But growing up, let's start like when was your first initial, I guess, introduction into the hip hop culture?
Huh. I mean, I think that I'm thinking about mid '80s. I'm thinking about the fact that we had a DJ. I mean, first of all, in the mid '80s, we were all, watching Beach Street and listening to Curtis Blow and listening to Houdini and listening to, just some of the early, and for me, I say early, I don't mean the super early, like Funky Four Plus One More, Grandmaster
Yeah.
Flash, that early, but that sort of second wave of folks who, were part of Def Jam and what is this, Cold Chillin' Records and, the Roxanne Shantays, the UTFOs. I remember hearing Roxanne Shante and her response to Roxanne.
Yeah.
And I think that changed the game for me, because not only was she incredible, and we were around the same age, which I actually didn't know until recently. I didn't realize that Roxanne Shante was around 14 years old when she came out with that song.
Mhm.
But also that she was a battle rapper. She wasn't coming out on the prissy, hyper feminine idea of what a woman should be. She was coming out swinging and swinging about this kind of pushback on the narrative of this fictional character named Roxanne, who UTFO was trying to get with, but she was stuck up and blah, 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 and all that. So
Right.
I just like was brought into her world through the idea of her being like, I'm here for the mic, and I'm here to hold a title, and I'm here to respond, and I'm here to battle.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, she was definitely one of the heavy influencers for, like, females in the movement, alongside like MC Light and Queen Latifah, and this just like the whole gang and the whole list of like unknown, like I shouldn't say unknown, but maybe like not as well known female hip hop artists in the scene. One of the things growing up, and I'm not too sure if you could relate, was that when hip hop was like first introduced to me, it was like very shunned upon. It's like it was just too rough of a music for quote unquote a child to be listening to, because it was very aggressive back in the days, outside like the fun stuff like Fat Boys and Beastie Boys and stuff like that. But did you find, like, when you were listening and being introduced to this style or this genre of music, do you find like your parents were like very supportive in, I guess with you listening into the hip hop music? Like, I'm from a very heavy like Caribbean background, so everything was like Jamaican music, soca. If it's West Indian, and then like over here was like the 80s pop rock type of thing. So that was like good music. And then when hip hop came on, I was shut upon. So you shouldn't be listening to this. It's gonna make you cause trouble. Did you face any of those hurdles?
And thinking even about my story, this idea of chasing samples and chasing histories is interesting for me, because it was the samples that allowed me to have this kind of intergenerational connection with my parents,
Right.
right? So I was excited about what they were listening to because of how Public Enemy was sampling, because of how Dr. Dre was sampling, right?
Yeah.
Especially talk about this hardcore history and on the West Coast, and of course we know that the West Coast is heavily associated with Parliament Funkadelic, whether we're talking about G Funk and just this kind of mid tempo gangster chill sound, palm trees. That energy was something that was familiar and enticing, and something that kind of defined California Blackness. And I was excited to be able to be in conversation with my parents about Parliament and Funkadelic for several reasons. I'm thinking of some of the earliest DJ crews in LA, World Class Wrecking Crew, which of course Dr. J was a part of, where he joined the ranks or became, the producer and DJ for NWA, but also Uncle Jam's Army, right? Which was the name of the Funkadelic album, right? So I remember seeing my mom's Uncle Jam's Funkadelic album and being like, Mama, you're listening to these DJs? What? And she's like, what DJs, boo? This came out
Yeah.
not about, and I'm like, wait, so what is this connection then? How do I know about this language of Uncle Jam Army and P Funk, and right? So no, I didn't have that. And I mean, matter of fact, you make me feel appreciative of my parents, because they were listening to Rick James. They were listening to
Right.
Marvin Gaye. They were listening to, and I say Marvin Gaye, but 80s Marvin Gaye, who was rough.
Yeah.
This wasn't the like, clean cut Motown,
Mhm.
cookie cutter Marvin, who was also brilliant, but this was like Marvin in his like post cocaine days. This is Marvin,
Yes.
who's
Yes. Yeah.
smoking weed. This is. So I think my parents were a little younger, and they were coming out of a different context where they were happy that there was this kind of new Black youth culture that was kind of keeping us connected to generations before us through the art form of sampling.
Right. And speaking, yeah, with the sampling too, I found like not so much like with like my parents, but like my grandmother and like my godfather and my uncles. I always found like because of the music selection I had playing, it always had a window of opportunity to have a discussion um, about what I'm listening to and what they used to listen to and where this sample came from and whatnot. I would never ever forget one day. I was when I used to live with my grandmother. My uncle was there, and I forgot it was some artist performing, and he's like, "Oh, these guys don't sing. All they're doing is yaka 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 yaka."
Yeah.
And back in the days, they were singing. And I'm just like I said, but it's just a new type of form of singing, uncle. And he's like, well, that music, that's not their music because this artist from my time, that's his music, and they go put all them heavy drums and ting on it. And
Right.
but because of it though, because of it, it was just able to open up the conversation. And I guess he said this is kind of like bridging that gap. Like I have never been so close to my family because of the sampling of what hip hop did, was able to bridge that those generations. And we sit there and we'll have conversations. We'll go dig up records. It's like, well, I got this record, and my uncle will pull out one of his records. Well, this came from this, which helped me even more as I became a DJ. When I was becoming a DJ, I was like, oh man, I could get some education inside this as I'm playing for this crowd.
For sure.
So like with that, I know like with like reading with your bio, one of your songs or artists that you said that kind of like captures your journey was Aretha Franklin. Why her?
I mean, wow, why Aretha? But I mean, for so many reasons. But I do wanna, and I'm absolutely gonna answer that. But I feel the need to say that as DJs, we are indebted to Jamaica and to the sound system in particular. Um, so that's actually super important to me when I hear you talk about your uncle being like, "Hey, that's not their music," and which absolutely I had those conversations as well with Uncle who were like, "That's James Brown. That ain't Public Enemy,"
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and then obviously intellectual property stuff, but that Jamaican sound system style of playing rhythms, right? And like this kind of not just like a recycling of or a cataloging of rhythms that are important to the communities that produce them and familiar to them is interesting to me. Just that Caribbean Black American link that I feel like is not explored enough, and particularly when talking about DJ culture. So I just want to say, as a Black American DJ, queer woman, I am indebted to 1950s Jamaica sound system culture and the introduction of ska, which became dub, which became reggae, which became hip hop, which became drum and bass, which became jungle, right? Just that what we're indebted to, like who we're indebted to. So yeah, which brings me to Aretha, right? And Aretha, you almost get baptized. I was baptized, let me just say that, in my home, because respect is just going down in history, or has gone down in history, as we know, as being that kind of like introduction to why we call her the queen, not just soul, but maybe of Black music in America, right? That sometimes when we're thinking about Aretha and James Brown as godfathers and godmothers, Aretha, for me, I have several points of entry with her, right? It's the entry or the introduction to her from my mom, from my grandmother, from the women in my family that kind of engaged her like a Black feminist icon. And I don't think that's the language they would use. I don't think they would be like, we love Aretha, she's feminist. But I think lyrically, how she was able to shift that Otis Redding song Respect to become a sort of civil rights 1967 anthem, but also a Black feminist anthem. Like, you're gonna give me my propers, like, and then of course just like, Dr. Feelgood. Listen, the lyrics are about this woman who absolutely wants to have a private sexual session with her man. So she's like, I love y'all, but y'all gotta go. Y'all gotta go. So, because I got me a man named Dr. Feelgood, and in fact, this doctor gives me the medicine that I need. So, you have Aretha who's coming out of the Black church,
Yeah, yeah.
explicitly sexual and sensual and expressing desire, even after lots of folks, shunned her for leaving the church and singing pop music as they did Marvin Gaye, as they did Sam Cooke. So Aretha's story, being from Detroit, very much so being tied to the civil rights movement and her father, C.L. Franklin's relationship with the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King in particular. Just those hardcore histories make her the funky woman that she was. And so that's part of why Aretha. But then my own introduction into Aretha came through a band, that's hilarious to call EPMD a band, a hip hop group, rap group. Let me reveal my age. We
Yes.
weren't calling it hip hop. We were calling it rap music in the 80s.
There we go.
Right? right. So when I heard EPMD, which was my older sister's like favorite rappers,
Mhm.
I had one of my favorite songs was the song called "I'm Housing," which is off of their first album, which came out
Yeah.
in 1988. This hell of a year for hip hop music, period, for rap music. 1988, Strictly Business. I heard "I'm Housing," and I was just like, "That's nasty. That's nasty, right?"
Yeah.
So then years later, because Aretha has this kind of American friendly greatest hits, do
Yes.
right woman, natural woman, respect. But the Aretha funk, you might have to
You gotta
dig.
do some digging.
You might have to dig, right?
Mhm.
So when I discovered in 1993, when I was a freshman, the fact that EPMD had sampled a song called Rock Steady, one of the few songs that actually was written by Aretha, because Aretha Franklin, I would say probably 80% of her career was composed of covers or songs
Right.
written by other people for her.
Mhm.
Or Rocksteady, which is an album that from an album, Young. What was? Gosh, I just totally forgot the name of the album. Not
Yeah.
Young Gibson Black, but can't remember. But I'll come back to it.
Mhm.
But that album, features several songs that Aretha wrote along with her sister. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But Rocksteady was written by Aretha in 1967, and EPMD sampled the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Sampled it well. But the song itself features Donny Hathaway on the organ, just all these like amazing,
Legendary. Yes.
all these amazing musicians. So Aretha, and then part of why I fell in love with that sample in particular was because when we talk about there's this dominant narrative with hip hop that like James Brown and Isaac Hayes and Parliament, right, were the men who were shaping the sound, when in reality, Shaka Khan, Aretha Franklin, Lynn Collins, all these black women were a part of shaping the sound of hip hop, because DJs were not just listening to and sampling men, right?
Right.
So that love for Aretha is about the fact that she was holding her own in jazz, in gospel,
Mhm.
in soul, in hip hop eventually.
I find.
So
Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
no, that's it.
Yeah. No. I definitely find like with Aretha Franklin, and maybe it's not as she doesn't really get the credit as she deserved, but she actually showed how you didn't have to stick to like the one vein when it comes to your art form. And I
Oh,
think because everything, you're right, everything was about James Brown. Like you heard that the drum beat going and be like, yo, that's a James Brown sample. And immediately everyone's trying to start digging into those records. But there's like, Martha Whitney, I believe it is. What are James Brown's artists? Martha something. Can't remember right now. But like her and Aretha Franklin, like when you actually go back and dig into their records, you're like,
right.
whoa, those breaks are there, right? And it was almost taboo. It's almost like with the DJs and the producers, they will purposely tell you it was a James Brown sample, but it wasn't James Brown, kind of like just to make your life difficult because it was that gem that they had in their pocket, from back in those days. Just to transition a little bit further, because I know like our talk time is limited. Um, with Aretha Franklin being that I'm gonna call her like your driving force in who you are right now. How do you find what I'm trying to say? How do you find like the influence of music and the art form, and maybe like some obstacles that you face in your work today? Because like you said earlier, it was so male driven, and you being recognized as a female in the game, and and all these, and you have a very strong um feminine background of females who did their work in this culture. Now that you're doing your own work, and I seen like you've done scholarship programs and you've done mixtapes and you've done tours, what challenges have you faced that's, I guess you could say, comparable to then and now? Like, do you face any obstacles now, or any setbacks?
That's a good question. I mean, let me say, I'm. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna really ride out this Aretha theme, right? I'm
Mhm.
gonna have us think about the fact that Aretha and Nina Simone get read as singers, as
Mhm.
opposed to brilliant musicians,
Mhm.
right? Both with their voices and also pianists,
Mhm.
right? And the extreme version of that is Aretha Franklin never learned how to read music, and then Nina Simone was a bona fide, as she would call it, black classical jazz musician.
Mhm.
But these women get framed as being singers, not as being geniuses like John Coltrane and Miles Davis,
Mhm.
right? Or even when we think about people like Bill Withers, who doesn't get simply reduced to being a singer, right? But he was a musician. He played the acoustic guitar, played the guitar, period.
Yes.
So that's one thing, right? Is the refusal to acknowledge women as being masters of craft, masters of instruments beyond their voices, right? So that's one
Mhm.
thing. What that brings me into in terms of my work, Craig, is I'm gonna push back a little bit and even talk about the use of the word female.
Mhm.
Right? I don't identify as a female anything. I identify, in terms of, pronouns, she, her, that's fine.
Mhm.
But I do not walk into, say, like a room and say, hello, I am a female DJ. And also,
Right.
I am a female Capricorn, as well as a female teacher, right? And
Yes.
nor do we
Yes.
hear people talk about male rappers, male DJs, male teachers. We use the descriptor female to indicate that these people are exceptions from the norm, right?
Right.
What we're saying that I'm a female DJ is that the blueprint or the sort of archetype for what a DJ is a man, is a cis
Yeah.
man,
Mhm.
right? A cis heterosexual man, whatever you want to, right?
Right. Right.
Things that I had to learn how to push back on is like I was oftentimes invited to spin featuring all female DJs, right? And part of what that meant too was that we were being paid less. So that female title was a costly little number, right? We were being
Yes.
paid less. We were being considered to be novelty, spectators, cute little things on the side, and not part of the real culture,
The real
right?
culture, which I found, um like for me, I even when like I go and train other DJs and send them out to gigs, I use female in this conversation to spark this conversation. Um, but for me, it's just like, for me, I don't really care if it was male or female, he or she. It's, to me, it's all about the skill set. And to me, it's just like, if that person was or is skillful enough to do the job, you book that person, you make that person do the job, and everything else comes after the fact, which,
Totally. But the thing that ends up happening is skill is gendered, right?
yes.
Especially when we're talking about technical things,
Mhm.
literally technology, right? So part of what I had to do to hold my own was make sure that I unlearned the way that women are socialized to fear technology.
Right.
I'm like, whatever you put in front of me, I'm going to like express myself on, whether that's Technique 1200s, whether that's CDJs, whether that's a DJ controller, right? Like I can work my way around a mixer, right? Like, so what?
Right.
So, so but no, and so I think that I think you highlighted my point, this notion of skill, but skill is associated with maleness, with cisgender men, particularly when it comes to music and certainly DJ culture.
I find like, your accomplishments and skills, just like, doing my research and Instagram stalking, and just to like to understand you a little bit more, because
Love
this is what it is now. There's like, who's this other DJ do I gotta talk to? Let me see what her skill set's like, and what she accomplished. But you're right. It's like, it's just this male female competition. Is like, okay, well, if this person is a female, I don't really have, why does she have the up on me, or if she has all this, oh, she gets this because she is a female, or she's a part of this community. Do you find that like that's a problem or a benefit on your side? Like, do you take advantage of the fact that, what, because I'm part of this community, or I identify as this or whatever, I'm going to take this opportunity to push myself as well as my community along, regardless of what these person think? Like, do you find like that's a challenge or to you, or?
And I mean, it's just an extension of my blackness as well. It's
Mhm.
what happens when, I mean, like, there's this thing that happens with Black folks globally, which could be dehumanizing on one hand, which is the whole "you have to work harder and be better" narrative. But on the other side of that, we tend globally to excel because of oftentimes what sort of obstacles we face, what hoops we have to jump through just to gain basic access, right? So, I mean, luckily, loving music, understanding music, listening to music closely comes naturally to me. It doesn't feel like work.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of recognizing the fact that, I have been allowed to enter a certain kind of boys club, or even not even just boys club, but just any kind of, access that I've been given to be able to generate resources from my work, from my art, is something that I take seriously, and I understand the political nature of it. I understand that politically and historically I was not supposed to be here. And so it helps that when it helps that I'm invested, and that I am committed to a rigorous process of like keeping up with technology, which keeps me in the conversation with DJs, especially, Craig, how quickly this technology is evolving.
Oh,
You
yes.
Craig, because I know that you are from the old school. You're sitting there in front of, I think they are techniques, but like, that we have arrived at a point now where people who call themselves DJs only have to press a button
Yep.
that says sync.
Yeah.
But I see that your turntables are labeled so that you know where to start if you're beat juggling or you want to begin a song. Like, right, like you've done that homework,
Yes.
because the skill set that is required to understand how to rock a party and not have to use a computer if you don't want to, right? That you
Yeah.
still know your way around vinyl. Now, on the other hand, I'm so glad that there's a new generation of folks who are like, yo, I want to be a DJ. Let me just kind of start that, that process. And so I think that it's a double-edged sword, but I just think in general, Black folks, Black women, Black queer folks are sort of forced to have to excel. So I think a lot of times when we talk about Black excellence, sometimes that's a reaction to being excluded.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of Black excellence, because I want everyone to know more about your accomplishment I want you to just give us more of an insight of your DJ scholarship, because maybe not everyone on the platform right now knows about that. Um, and again, because of time, I want everyone to know about your excellence and everything that you accomplished. So just dive into that for me a little bit more. How that DJ scholarship and your career came about. Like, just give us some more insight on that.
Okay, well, DJ scholarship is a term that I coined in like 2013.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's twofold. I think so. There are four sort of cultural practices that I look at to explain the fact that I believe that DJs are cultural workers, sort of informal historians, and information specialists, and like music, librarians, right? And those four cultural practices are: one, chasing samples, right? Chasing samples. And then digging through the crates is the second cultural practice. The third is studying album cover art, right? And just thinking about how much we learn about the story, the visual story of an album. And then the fourth cultural practice is reading liner notes critically, which for me then developed into reading music reviews, reading book reviews, reading movie reviews, and then reading critical scholarship, reading, ethnomusicology, academic essays on Black music or whatever. It just sort of, this listening practice grew into a critical reading practice, grew into a pedagogical approach where I brought these conversations from the streets into the classroom as an organic intellectual. And yes, I've gone through several universities, but I have a BA in sociology, I have a master's in ethnic studies. And really, what is Black music if it's not a project in social commentary and social explanation?
Mhm.
So music, Black music globally. So I think the second fold is DJ scholarship is a global Black music project. It grew out of the fact that I fell deeply in love with Black British UK soul, jungle,
Mhm.
just Sade. Like, just when you think about, all this music, Black music that came out of the UK, that oftentimes get erased because of the Black American music dominant kind of discussion that we are always having.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with UK music. And then once again, Jamaica comes back, right?
Oh,
That so we know that, had the Windrush not been a reality in the 1950s, we would not have these sound systems in the UK. So then once again, like, there's this relationship between, this island. I've been thinking about it a whole lot recently, even more, just Jamaica's influence on Black music. And also this historical conversation between Black America and Jamaica, right? That some of those original sound systems would be playing 1950s Black R&B and or doo-wop band music,
yeah.
right? And then out of that, there's some, ska being developed, not necessarily solely from a Black American influence, but a diasporic dialogue really that happened. And then I fell in love also with South African music, right? So South African house music to be exact. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm deeply in love with Afrobeat, as in 1970s Tony Allen, Fela music. I'm deeply in love with, like, just various forms of Black music around the world. And so DJ scholarship allowed me to investigate, to explore, to travel to these places, to show up with questions about how these different genres were born and in what social and historical and political context. So DJ scholarship is a methodology of sorts.
I love the fact that you, and again, it's so timely that you brought it back to the Jamaican sound system and the culture where everything came, because it's actually trending right now. Like Busta Rhymes has been going on a rant these last few weeks saying that we need to pay homage back to Jamaica, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the sound systems. We wouldn't have like the performers the way we have performers now, because they're like the originators of the sound systems. Like, even for me to date, I go, like I said, I don't want to go into any club if my car is louder than the club, I'm not playing at that club. It's
Yeah,
just, you know what I'm saying? And like people hear me roll around the street and be like, yo, Craig's coming down the block, you know, because they hear me. And I was like,
I
this
love
is
it.
what a sound's supposed to be like.
I love that.
So
I love
it's
that.
you know, it's almost like we have our standard to be like I said, we as DJs, you know, I don't want to be like true DJs, you know, but you know, we as DJs who really understand this culture and really put our heart and soul into it, we try to bring all that history, all those elements to the table so future DJs could go ahead and push forward and be like, you know, I listened to Lynnée, I listened to Craig, and you know, from their music or from their style, I got this, and then this is how I became the type of DJ I am today. Um, I think we still got a little bit more time before we go into the open floor questionings. I think there was something else I wanted to cover before. Well, we already touched on like gender roles and cultures and how that influences. Did I miss anything that you might want to touch on before we open up the floor?
Yeah, because just in thinking of part of the mission of this 2 day conference, which again, thank you to all the organizers and to you, Craig, for inviting me and doing that Instagram stalking as a form of homework because we've all done it and that's great and that's honest. But you know, just thinking about all of these intersections, right? And that I mentioned that I'm also queer, right? And so in the same way that I think about the erasure of this Caribbean influence on so many genres of music across the world, I also think about the hidden history of very specifically Black and brown queer influence on electronic music, obviously techno and house, and the
Yeah.
way in which those Black queer narratives or origins are removed and distorted. And it's a dangerous game because we're talking about the EDM, right, movement growing out of, you know, essentially house and techno music culture, and we know that Detroit is not benefiting financially
Yes. Yes.
their creation of
Yeah.
techno music. We know that Kingston is not benefiting from
Yeah.
their creation of the sound system. We know that the South Side of Chicago is not benefiting from
Yeah.
their creation of house music, right?
Mhm.
Instead, Calvin Harris is, right?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yep.
so we want to. So just in terms of just the ways in which my full identity, like a Black queer woman from Los Angeles, California, born in the 1970s, survived the Reagan era, you know, was part of the generation who watched so many people disappear from AIDS, from crack addiction, from mass incarceration. You know, like I know that all of those sort of intersections are important to me when I'm thinking about this music, because when I talk about the Reagan 80s and how I survived it, here is what is key and here is what makes queer folks in particular, but also Black people in general in America in this context, vulnerable to erasure is that how many of us did we lose who can't
Yeah.
tell stories,
Can't tell
who
the
are
stories.
in prison and cages, who lost their lives to AIDS because of the stigma and all these things and such, right? Who lost their lives or their battles with addiction. So there's a whole chunk of history missing. And as a queer woman, I feel like that's part of my work is to make sure to name and to use my voice to speak with those ghosts who were once on the dance floor.
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. I see that Bradley, you want to chime in real quick before we move on or open the floor?
Yeah, actually, this is such a great talk. Holy crap, I can like listen to this all day. But I want to let you know it's 3:10, and we wanted to make time to open up the Q&A to all our incredible guests right now. So what I'd like to do first, if it's all right with you, is we actually did have a question or two in chat, and they've kind of allowed us or asked us to kind of pose it to you on their behalf. So I'll read the first question. Everyone who's watching right now, if you've got a question you just want to ask directly, by all means, please do. We'd love to hear from you. If not, keep the questions in chat and we'll let them kind of flow that way. So first question comes from Adrian, and he writes, what are ways you would suggest educators intentionally and meaningfully integrate hip hop in the classroom for students?
Uh, who, who you want to take that? Lynnée, you want to take that first?
Okay, sure. I mean, I think first and foremost, taking the scholarship and the literature around hip hop, which also means scholarship and literature around sound system culture, seriously. And I think the process is first in educating yourself, and valuing the music enough, and the culture and the people and the places that they come from enough to really think critically about how to create an accessible but challenging and critical, educational program for them to think about these connections. I think one of the things that I've had to learn, especially with like DJs tend to be music snobs and turn their noses up at some of the stuff that's coming out. And we do this every generation, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, you said your uncles were like, they're just putting beats over these original songs, right? We do that from generation to generation. But I remember, I was teaching also at Cal State LA. I was teaching, a course on the history of Black protest music. And at the time, this is the beginning of this like trap sound. And I was just turned the hell off. Like, I don't know what people are talking about. They're not enunciating, just all this potential classes, even though I'm not some rich person kind of attitude, maybe even some kind of creeping in of respectability shit. But when I started to listen, in particular to Young Thug,
Yeah.
I was like, dude is brilliant.
Yes.
And he's complicating gender. So
Yes.
now young people who are loyal to him and like respecting me for bringing his voice into the classroom, because I will go golden age hip hop all day and be like, y'all need to know about DMC, y'all need to know about Queen Latifah. But when I brought in Young Thug, they were like, okay, we can trust her, and now we can commit to this learning process. So I think it's about reading the scholarship, reading the literature, thinking about music and plays, but also listening to and keeping your ear to what is on the streets and what young people are, I'm going to use this word consciously, loyal to. It is like
Yes.
what they are loyal to. It is your job to understand, if you're going to bring hip hop into the conversation and into the classroom, what young people are listening to and who they're loyal to.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, and I mean to add on to that too as well is just really understand the craft that DJing is not about the sex, the drugs, and the fast life. Like if you're really deep into this culture and you're trying to pass this information along, is you really gotta respect it, and that's what with the class that I done at the university. I tell, everyone's like, yo, you got to respect your instruments, respect the craft, respect the genre, respect whoever's behind the deck, because they're the pros. I'm not going to go any more than that, because you pretty much summed it up. We'll just move on to the next question if Bradley is ready for that.
That's a good point, though, is to kind of respect the craft and to trust the DJ.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how they don't trust the DJs. Yes, go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, we've got a question from Lloyd. Lloyd, if you want to chat or unmute and talk, please, by all means, go for it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. My question was specifically about trap music, and just if you were to try and define it as a genre, because there's maybe a difference between people's interpretation of it. I really like what you had to say about Young Thug, because his lyrics, if you are able to discern what it is that he's saying, because he has a very interesting candor, I suppose. Yeah, flow.
Totally.
Yeah, it's. I read a funny little like YouTube comment. Somebody said, he's like a linguistics professor of Harvard almost, or something. It's really, he's a very interesting man.
I agree, and I like that question in terms of defining trap, because first of all, I mean, in an American context, first of all, it's really important that I remember to kind of decenter the United States as America as a whole, but in the States in particular, the sort of etymology of the word trap is complicated because
Of course.
all of these other things, right? I'm saying all of these other things, and let me be explicit that it's a word that was used to describe, in particular, places where
Yeah,
home.
like
Right? I'm
sorry,
just those who don't know about it.
when Migos came out with the Bandos track, that was like almost an homage to the trap, I suppose you could say, maybe.
Trap game, the trap houses, the trap boys.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I just think so. I think that just like so many, even like the word jazz, we were having this conversation about the use of the word jazz to explain that genre of music, right? Where like it has multiple meaning to multiple communities in multiple places
Yeah.
because of music migration. So what might be called trap in Miami may
It's
not
more
be
techno style, yeah.
Yeah. It
right.
might be called Miami bass, but they just upgraded, you know. So like the
But
just to interject a little bit, I find like with when it comes to like defining the genre, I mean if you look into other DJs crates, if they ever allow you to look into the crates, uh like for me in particular, if you look into my crates, you'll see like maybe about 90 genres of different music. But if you really look into the detailing of it, you'll see urban music, but underneath urban, there'll be like golden hip hop, throwback hip hop, boom bap hip hop, you know, diss trap, or you know, R&B, soul R&B, slow jams. So there's always these subdivisions. I find that with me particular, and I'm not too sure about anybody else, I always have the root, you know, of the genre, and then underneath that genre is how each category breaks it off. Because, like you said, trap in Toronto is not the same trap if you go to Miami. It's not the same trap if you go, you know, out to Amsterdam. It is based on the culture of each city or country. So I don't really get hung up in the genre. I get hung up with the music. I'll be like, this is what this goes into this category. I know this will not make that drive everything that I play, right? I'm like, oh, this has to be this genre, you know, seal tight for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you know, trap music is, you know, more definitely like what Lynnée was talking about, just has its origins in, you know, some very tough urban environments. I think one thing that's really kind of shameful in all honesty is there's, you know, you could go to maybe a radio station and they will categorize rap and hip hop as just a general urban category, which is I don't know how to describe that. Yeah, code word.
Yeah. No, definitely. It tends to be I feel a little bit of a disconnect or like a distance from the word urban, but I also want to acknowledge the musicality and what I'm calling trap as well. Like I really want to talk, like when you talk about, you know, Young Thug being, you know, just having such a serious grasp on the English language that one could compare him to the Harvard scholar, when really arguably it's like, oh, the Harvard scholar may actually in fact be like Young Thug, but whatever. Here's the thing, right? The Harvard scholar isn't the sort of the model for a mastery of language, and particularly when you're talking about Black Americans who were punished and killed and tortured for learning how to read and write, for speaking out of turn, right? So what we have done with language through music is really amazing. But in terms of trap and in terms of the phrasing and what comes up for me when I think of like Migos and Young Thug and some of the sort of like, you know, this sort of subgenre artists that belong to this sound that I associate with being trap, one thing that I think about is the 808, right? Like the drum programming, and then on top of all of that, the phrasing, the right? Like that, I'm sure that you can make a connection between work songs, you know, like
the gym, yeah,
phrasing, you know, like that is just a part of this diasporic sound, but also that technology plays a role in making it unique and contemporary for where folks are. But I just wanted to say that, like, I didn't want to be like, Miami bass is different from what I mean by trap.
Yes.
Right?
yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for all that, Lloyd. Appreciate it.
Okay,
Just gonna jump to
thanks,
another
guys.
question here. We've got a question from Zoe. Zoe, the floor is yours if you'd like to ask.
Hi, Zoe.
Zoe, can't hear you, Zoe.
You're on mute, Zoe. Sorry. Rewind that comment, please. There you go. Oh,
No,
oh no, Zoe.
Zoe.
Unfortunately, I don't know if you're still on mute, but we can't hear you.
You still can't hear me?
All right,
Yeah,
there we
now,
go.
right on.
Awesome. Okay, I'll be right quick. So we were chatting about this just before we came on to this session. So I want to ask both of you, just off the top of your head, given this exact moment that we're in, we were talking about elections, and I wonder if each of you like had a song, like what would be the song you would play right now for this minute, this moment?
For me, it would be Busta Rhymes, The Purge. Right.
Busta. Okay.
Busta Rhymes, The Purge would be the song of the hour for me. It's so fitting with the election.
Oh man, I mean, one song? That's rude, Zoe. That's rude. That's foul. I'm like, from what era, what genre, what generation, what time period? Okay, I will say Public Enemy. I think it's called Black Still Out. Wait, Black Still in the Hour of Chaos, because the opening is, I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read
Reddit says you were suckers.
wanted me for their army or whatever, they should be given a damn. I said never. Here's a land that never gave a damn about a brother like me and myself, because they never, right? So like, just that, like, I got a letter from the government the other day. Like, just that storytelling that Chuck D does, you know, and just that amazing, dark, sinister, lyrical Bomb Squad, DJ Terminator X package of Black radical resistance is coming up for me right now.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zoe. That was super fun. I think we're gonna have a really quick, Adrian in chat wanted to ask a question. We've got only 1 minute left. So hopefully Adrian jump up, and if we can make it quick, that'd be great.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, Bradley. Hello, everyone. Great conversation. What's up? Craig Brooklyn. Big question for everyone is similar vein of what Zoe mentioned. Albums have a huge power to create like a narrative that could be powerful and resonate with everyone. So with your roles as being like curators of music, you have an album recommendation for everyone to dive into, that will give like maybe a bit of like hip hop history while also giving us a flavor as to what type of hip hop you're into.
That's a great question.
Wow.
Great. Come on, let me hear you with this one album.
Wow, the one album. That's heavy, bro. I'm the biggest Busta fan. So I will say go back to his first album, When Disaster Strikes.
Okay.
That will probably, if you want to go a little bit before that, the group that he was a part of, Leader of the New School.
New School, nice.
If you dive into that, you'll see everything come back full circle. I'll just leave it right there.
I love it. And you see how Jamaica keeps coming up? Like I love that. Yeah, I just want people to understand that Buster too is Caribbean, you know, like, but I think that he's Jamaican, right?
Yes, he's Jamaican.
Okay, right. So like, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna tell you that in advance, and I'm going to encourage you in terms of an album to consider a discography, and that is the discography of A Tribe Called Quest.
Nice.
And I'm going to encourage you to also read a book written by an author by the name of Hanif Abdurraqib, who has written, I think, one of the most important pieces of literature about the history of hip hop culture, but just the general cultural history that he offers to contextualize A Tribe Called Quest is something that has changed me, like as a thinker, as a DJ, as a writer. So A Tribe Called Quest, I think they have about 5 albums.
Yep.
In that book. And Go Ahead in the Rain is the title of the book. And again, the author is Hanif Abdu Rakib. Go Ahead in the Rain, A Tribe Called Quest.
Amazing.
Thank
Adrian,
you.
thanks for such a good question. That was fantastic. You know, I feel awful having to do this, but we're just over time now, and it's incredible. It's a testament to how enriching and engaging these conversations are, and how much of yourselves and this beautiful knowledge you bring to these conversations. DJ Lynnée, I can't say enough how cool you are, and just how grateful we are to have you here with us and sharing your story and what you're doing and how you think about music. And DJ Craig, Brooklyn, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for just being so much fun and being a part of this. Like, we all just appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Craig. And thank you all for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.